The first time I tried to build a deck agent the normal way with a clean set of hard-coded tools, the output was garbage. The deck existed, but the layouts were all over the place. So I tried just one change. I removed almost all the tools, gave the agent a single code execution tool, and forced it to generate the slides directly by writing open-ended code. Instantly, the layouts got way better. And once it finally found the layout that actually works, I saved that code as a skill so it doesn't have to reinvent it from scratch on every single run. Now, every new deck starts from already working code, so the agent gets better results with fewer tokens and still maintains full control. That's what skills are. Reusable, on-demand scripts and instructions an agent can call to run a specific workflow efficiently. They're not just MCPs, and they're not just normal tool calling either. They're the layer that makes agents compound instead of starting from scratch every single time. In this video, I'll give you a clean mental model for skills and how they compare to MCPs and tools. Then we'll build a simple skills folder and I'll show you how to add 3 real skill workflows to an agent to generate docs, spreadsheets, and presentations. And once you see the pattern, you'll be able to create your own skills for any workflow and any agent that you want. Let's build this. Okay, so what even is a skill? In AI agents, skills are reusable on-demand instructions and scripts that show an agent how to perform a specific workflow efficiently. The important part here is on-demand. A skill is not something that sits in your agent prompt all the time. It's something that the agent can pull in only when it needs it. So you can think about it like a small folder in your repo. Each folder is one skill. And that skill contains whatever the agent needs to execute a specific workflow. Sometimes that's just instructions, but most of the time it's also code. And the reason this matters is simple. The agent can now reuse real working code instead of reinventing it from scratch on every request. That's the core idea. Now, the next question is, what are skills not? First, skills are not a replacement for MCPs. MCP is still useful. It's still the easiest way to give an agent access to external systems like Google Drive, Notion, Slack, Gmail, or your own database. Skills do not replace that. Skills can sit on top of MCPs if you want, but they also don't even have to use MCPs at all. Second, skills are not a replacement for function calling. If your agent needs to call one tool, do one simple thing and return, classic tool calling is still the best. It's fast, it's predictable, it's easy to debug. So if you know the exact schema and you know the exact output you want, you should keep it simple. For example, if your agent just needs to submit one customer support ticket in Jira, you do not need a skill. If your agent needs to fetch customer support record and return it, you also don't need a skill. In these cases, a regular tool call is a lot more reliable. The moment you introduce code execution, you're giving the agent more freedom, and that freedom is powerful, but it also comes with more moving parts. Now, here's where skills become a game changer. Skills are for workflows, when there's a sequence of steps, edge cases, data transformations, iteration on output, or when the agent needs to generate an actual artifact like a doc, spreadsheet, or a deck. This is where traditional tool calling usually starts to break down, because most tools we build are too narrow. They only expose just a few operations, and that sounds good on paper, of course, but then in practice, you end up boxing the agent in. For example, a classic doc tool might allow the agent to add headings, a paragraph, maybe a list, maybe a table if you're lucky, but the moment the user asks for something outside of that narrow set, the agent can't do it. And then you either end up building more tools or you start adding more and more schemas. And now you're back to the same problem with the tool context bloat. So with skills, instead of giving the agent 50 tools for every possible formatting operation, you give it one code execution tool. And then you give it a skill that contains the working code for creating a good-looking doc using the library you chose. And because it's all just code, it can basically do anything that the library supports. Tables, quotes, images, different layouts, whatever. And this is exactly why in my deck example, the normal approach gave garbage results. The agent wasn't stupid, it was just too constrained. Then I switched it to open-ended code, and the agent was finally able to explore. It could try different layouts, it could debug, it could iterate, and then once it figured out something that works, it saved it as a skill. So next time it doesn't start from zero, it starts from already working code that generates a reasonable deck. Now, one more important point. A lot of people talk about skills as if they're just prompts. And technically, sure, you can have a skill that's just an instructions file. But my take is that skills only become a powerful concept when there is code. Because without code, you're not really changing what the agent can do. You're just changing how it thinks. With code, however, you're actually giving it a reusable capability, a reusable workflow that it can execute and iterate on. So the mental model I want you to keep is this. Skills are a way to take something that the agent has figured out through open-ended code execution and turn it into a reusable building block. You can then drop that building block into any agent you build. And suddenly, this agent has the foundation in that domain that it needs to complete those tasks effectively. Alright, now that we have a clean definition and we know what skills are not, let's talk about how skills compare to tools and MCPs and where they actually fit in your stack. Here's the only diagram you need for this. At the bottom, you have code. Everything is code, tools are just code wrapped into a callable interface for the agent. MCP is the same thing. It's just a standardized way to expose tools that live outside of your code base. So both MCPs and tools sit on top of the code because fundamentally, everything is just code. The only difference is where this code executes. It can be on your machine if it's a custom tool, or it can be on someone else's server if it's an MCP. Now, skills are on a separate axis. A skill is not a tool, it's a workflow. It's the glue that takes you from the task to a result by chaining code and tools together in a way that's reusable. And this is why skills can sit at different levels. Sometimes a skill is mostly code. Sometimes it calls tools, sometimes it calls MCP tools. But the key is that it's always a workflow, not a single action. So why do skills exist in the first place? The answer is because the normal way we've been building agents hits two walls really fast. The first wall is the token bloat. With classic tool calling, you connect a bunch of tools and the agent needs to see all of them up front. And even if it only uses one tool, it still pays the context cost for everything. This gets even worse with MCP servers because each server can contain a whole bunch of tools, and once you connect a few of them, you end up burning tens of thousands of tokens before the agent even starts working. The second wall is workflows. Some workflows are just hard, and they require multiple MCP or tool calls in a specific sequence. The model might be smart, but it still has to learn how to do a workflow end-to-end before it can deliver a functional result. And if you don't save that knowledge somewhere, it has to do it again and repeat the same mistakes on every single run. You can clearly see this pattern in my 2000 tools agent experiment. The first run used over 76,000 tokens. And then on the next run, after saving it as a skill, it dropped to around 8,000 tokens, basically a 10x reduction while being a lot more reliable. So now let's translate these problems into the benefits that actually matter for us agent builders. The first benefit of using skills compared to tools and MCP servers is increased autonomy and flexibility. Instead of being boxed into a narrow tool schema, the agent can execute the full workflow in code and adapt as it goes. The second benefit is reuse. Once the agent figures out the hard part of a workflow, it can reuse it next time instead of reinventing it from scratch. The third benefit is the cost. The first time the agent explores a workflow, it might actually even spend more tokens, but once it saves that workflow as a skill, the next run is dramatically cheaper because it's not generating and debugging everything from scratch. And the last benefit is consistency. Your users start getting docs, sheets, and decks that follow the same structure and layout instead of looking random every single time. So yes, this is a game-changing direction, but it also comes with trade-offs, as many people noted in the comments of my previous videos, especially around safety and debugging. And you need to understand these trade-offs before you start giving your agents open-ended code execution. So let's talk about that next. The first trade-off is debugging visibility. With normal tool calls, you can see exactly what the agent did and what went wrong. With skills, the trace often just shows a massive chunk of code and then whatever the agent decided to log. So if the agent made a mistake inside that code or used the wrong intermediate data, you might not even notice. You don't really know what happened unless you go and read through all the code. The second trade-off is safety. The whole point of skills is that the agent is writing and executing open-ended code, so you need a secure sandbox. And you should avoid sensitive or destructive operations unless you're ready to add a human in the loop. Now, in my view, however, this doesn't introduce a completely new category of risk compared to standard MCP approach. If you give your agent an MCP tool that can delete CRM records, it can still wipe your entire database. With code execution, the risk is the same. It just becomes faster and more destructive, and it might be more difficult for you to see if the agent is doing something wrong or not. But you still need to treat this with the same level of seriousness as any high-impact tools or MCP servers. Now, the simplest rule that makes this safe in practice is really straightforward. Agents can use skills, but they cannot modify the skills directory themselves. Just lock that folder down with permissions inside your sandbox. That's exactly what I did. And then the agent can generate a new skill somewhere else if it wants, but it can't override the skills that you already trust. That way, every skill is reviewable, versioned in your repo, and you always know exactly what code your agent is allowed to run. Alright, now that we have the safety basics and we understand what skills are, let's actually build this. So let's start from an example of an actual skill in production. And the best such example we can find today is actually on ChatGPT. If we tell ChatGPT right now to print the structure of home OAI skills directory, we're gonna see something interesting. ChatGPT has already adopted skills as well without even announcing this yet, which definitely means that this is the next big thing. ChatGPT currently has skills for docs, PDFs, and spreadsheets that you can use right now. And as you can see, each skill follows a very specific structure. And this structure was initially established by Anthropic, just like with MCP servers. So the main thing here is the skill.md file. This skill.md file looks something like this. It has a name and a description on top, which is what your agents will use to discover those skills. And then it has the specific instructions on how to use the scripts inside this folder. Each markdown file can also reference other markdown files inside, which the agent can read on demand. Like, for example, if the agent wants to check some concrete examples. Okay, now that you understand the structure for skills, let me show you how to actually build them. And the easiest way to build skills today is by using Claude. The reason we want to use Claude for this is because Anthropic's models have been specifically trained to use skills, which will provide you with much better results. So to get started, you can simply ask Claude which specific skills does it currently have. All the skills that Claude has access to today are also available in this Anthropic Skills GitHub repo. And inside the skills repo, we also have the special skill creator skill. So this is the skill that we're going to be using today in order to build other skills for our AI agents. If you don't want to use Claude, you can also do this in ChatGPT or in any other AI IDE simply by downloading this repo and then providing your agent with this skill creator skill. Okay, so now let's tell Claude to read this skill creator skill. Awesome, now Claude has all the context it needs in order to create the skills for other AI agents. Now, here's the key part you need to understand. Just prompting Claude to create a skill without providing any additional context is not going to produce reliable results. Prompting AI to create prompts for other AI is the easiest way to create a slop machine. What you need to do is provide your own unique documentation, your SOPs, and specific details on how you perform a certain process. If you don't have those SOPs, you can still create a skill. Just make sure to provide clear answers to all the questions that Claude is going to ask you, and also tell it to use web search because it can sometimes also find some valuable documentation online. Do keep in mind, however, that if you create skills this way, it's going to require a bit more iteration. So the process that I'm going to be productizing today is going to be the process for building agents with our framework. I already have this very clear documentation file that explains exactly how to do this step by step. So all I need to do is simply download this file, then go back to Claude and tell it to create a skill for building AI agents using our framework. Then I'm also going to provide a link to our documentation just in case and drop this workflow.mtc file itself. Perfect. Now let's hit send. After Claude collects all the necessary information from our documentation, it proceeds to creating the skills files themselves. After a few minutes, Claude tells me that the skill has been completed. We can preview all the files here on the right. So it seems like Claude documented everything quite well with our framework. However, it didn't really add any scripts. So let me tell it to also add some scripts, for example, to set up the directory structures. Also, one more very cool use case for skills is model distillation. Essentially, you can use a bigger model like Claude Opus to create the skill itself, and then you can provide the skill to a smaller model without sacrificing the quality of the results. Perfect, now the skill already looks way better and it has some specific scripts like to add MCP servers, to create tools or initialize the agency. So now you can either copy this to your own skills in Claude and just use it directly in Claude, or you can download it and use it pretty much with any other AI agent out there. And surprisingly, even Codex has already adopted skills as well. So let me now show you how to drop the skill in Codex to build other AI agents. So let's open an empty repo and then in the terminal, let's simply type Codex. Now we can simply type /skills and then select skills installer. Then we can simply drag and drop this newly downloaded skill and then hit enter. Now you can see it tells me that the skill has been installed. However, we also need to restart Codex in order to pick up these new skills. Now, if we type /skills again, we should see our new Agency Swarm Builder skill. Perfect. So now let me tell Codex to create a virtual assistant agent that uses all the skills from ChatGPT. To be honest, the way skills are implemented right now in Codex isn't the best. The best way is to always allow the agent itself to select the skill accordingly. This is actually one thing that I also forgot to instruct Codex to do, is to create this key router tool that essentially lists all the skills with their names and descriptions so that before executing the task, the agent can pick accordingly. So let me do this right now. Okay, now that our agent is created, let's actually deploy it. So to deploy our agent, all we need to do is push our changes to GitHub. Then let's go to our platform called Agency AI, and then on the dashboard, let's hit New Agency. We're actually one of the very few platforms that provides you with secure sandboxes out of the box, which you will need if you want to deploy agents with skills to production. So let's hit on our new virtual assistant agent and let's wait until it's deployed. Okay, now that our agent is deployed, let's quickly put it in a web app and then let's test it. So for the first prompt, let me tell it to create a deck that compares GPT Image 1.1 model with Gemini Nano Banana Pro. As you can see, first the agent uses the special Discover Skills tool, and then it proceeds to reading individual skill files. And for the second prompt, let me copy the task from GPT 5.2 announcement to create a workforce planning model spreadsheet. Now let's wait until both tasks are completed. As you can see, the agent executes a very long chunk of code using the exact approach that OpenAI suggests in their skill and the methods, and then at the end it produces this workforce planning model file. In the meantime, the deck has also been generated as well, so let's download this and let's check this out. And yeah, I mean, this deck looks completely usable. It does have some minor formatting issues, but overall I think it's a very good result. Let's also check out the workforce planning model. It has a quick instructions section at the beginning, and then, yeah, I mean, this is like an actual planning model. As you can see, all the cells are functional. So if I change one of the cells, it should modify the fields in other sheets as well. So let's take a look at the summary. Right now, the annual is $30 million. And if I change it to 78, then the total is already $32 million. So yeah, that's it for this video. This is everything you need to know about skills. Hopefully this was really valuable for you. If it was, make sure you leave a comment. Let me know how you are personally planning or are already using skills. And of course, check out our platform when you're ready to deploy your agents to production. Thank you, and don't forget to subscribe.